Welcome to part two of this four-part conversation series. I'm Norman Blissett, Managing Director of Gallinack and Chair of Cyclopark, and over this series I'll be in conversation with Paul Tuohy about how our respective charity boards and management teams have responded to the COVID crisis. Paul has just stepped down as CEO of national cycling charity Cycling UK and has many years of leading charities. In the second part, we discuss how boards and exec teams have worked together through the crisis.
If we can move on a bit to think about particularly the board and the executive team and how they work together as a team, because the traditional model of boards, particularly in the charity sector, is you've got your board of trustees and you've got your executive team, and there's not the sense of working together as a team. Obviously, when you go into this sort of crisis, there's much more need for people to be working quite closely together. And I just wondered, from your experience of Cycling UK, how that's felt, how that's worked.
Well, that's a how long have you got? But because we're at a stage now. They are at a stage now, I think, where they've got an incredibly competent board. But that's still not to say that it can't progress. And I've seen the nuances and changes of that. They were one of the most complicated, membership organisations are complicated charities anyway. I think that's well known. You've got that additional stakeholder of membership and members' rights and all the rest of it. And sometimes in terms of good governance and wanting to do things, where you've not got membership, you can do that and work it out with your board and executive. When you've got membership, there might be rules and regulations that you have to abide by, and you have to consult with them as well. And that's all well and good, and I think that can be incredibly powerful. It can also, if it's not done in the right way, hold an organisation up. And it's about getting a balance, and it's about communicating that in the same way I said with staff earlier, openly and honestly, with the membership. It goes back to my fundraising days with International Care and Relief, a small charity working in Africa, where much of the money came from child sponsorship, 15 quid a month to sponsor a child. And it was, only about £9.50 of that £15 was going directly and impacting in the field because of the extortionate costs of, if you like, sort of trying to communicate to the donor and let them know how things are going and doing all of that and sending field workers out and taking photographs and so on. So I wanted to stop the whole thing. And the board were incredibly nervous about that. They thought we could lose a lot of revenue and a lot of support. But the messaging was very much that if you carry on giving this amount of money, if we do it in another way of building communities, you can get maybe £12.50 of your money and then when you multiply that out and extrapolate it, you give them, and that was communicated to them, and it was a good success. There were some people who didn't stay, but overall, the net gain for the charity in terms of what you could do at the core end of the business was better, was more impactful. And so you have to ask those fundamental questions. And I think with the board now at Cycling UK, whereas previously to get on the board, you have to be a member, number one. You have to be put up for election, and then the membership will vote for you. And I found this sort of really hard when I first started at CTC, as it then was, because the number of people engaging in the process was tiny. Absolutely tiny. And there were some people became trustees with maybe 30, 40 votes. It's like, whereas we were used to doing it in a more traditional, what I would call the better way, is to do it as a job. This is the skills we're after. We need people that can help, if it was in communications, for example, that they've got a CV that shows that they understand comms and can do that and can give support to me and my team, and you'd have them on the board for that, and you'd come in, so you'd get those skill sets mapped out, and it would just be done that way. And if you then do it that way and then put it to the membership, you might not get people with those skills. But what's happened now is that I think with the change of the organisation and the professionalism of it, all of a sudden these incredible members have come, have put their heads above and said, I'd like to be a trustee now, because it is very, very clear that because it's got tremendously good governance and is run very, very well, that when you've got nearly 70,000 members, there were people in there beforehand who were thinking, no, it's not really for me. I don't really want to do this. Whereas now they're saying I do. And also now the rules allow you to have some non-members if there's certain skills gaps you can't get. So but you have to change the rules and regulations around that in charity code. But it just makes it's a longer process. But once you have the plan, once you tick it off, then you'll be surprised how quickly you can get those people. And I think the way in which they interact then with the CEO is what I call the bridge between the board and the organisation. So it really is a vital role in doing that as that conduit. And I think making sure that you've got the methodologies in place so that you're very, very clear on what you're reporting, what it is they need to see, that you are open and to challenge. If challenge is done properly, that's a good thing. What you don't want is some board. I mean, and I've experienced lots down the years. I've experienced the completely nitpicking, antagonistic, all in, all fighting all the time board. The wouldn't say boo to a goose, everyone is so lovely and caring, sharing, doesn't matter what you do, it's marvellous board. You actually both are no good at all. What you want to do is you want to get a board that is professional, that has the skills match aligned to the organisation, and that there is a clear sort of reporting culture that everyone understands. And I think one of the key things that can help this hugely, that doesn't happen enough in the third sector, is when boards come on, these are volunteers. The vast majority, 99% in this country, they are volunteers, and the amount of training and advice and spend on them is tiny, and it needs to be more, because it can make such a difference. The huge difference having a good board away day that we've done to help facilitate that, and that in itself has sort of really paid it for itself in leaps and bounds. But I think when trustees first come into the charity, there should be a set out program that could involve maybe some of the workshops that NTPO do. It could be joining me with something that Kivo do, depending on the role. Because the more glue there is between the executive and the board, the stronger the charity will be, and the more open it can be as well. Then.
Yeah, completely agree with all of that. I think that a lot of charity boards, I call it the curse of loveliness, because I experienced that.
Lovely term.
A lot, where everything's just lovely and lovely staff and lovely services, and there's just it's all support and no challenge. And then, as you say, you've got the other end of it. And I think thinking really carefully about who's coming onto your board and getting that mix of skills that are there. And I've seen a lot of charity boards, especially the more prominent ones that rely on fundraised income. They will often go for, understandably, trustees who have lots of connections. They might be wealthy themselves. They might have connections into wealthy people or organisations. So you kind of get that. But I do think, I'm a chartered director, so I've gone through the Institute of Directors training, ending up with being a chartered director, and we're at the Institute of Directors. We're getting more and more into the notion that every board, and I mean charity boards with this, should have someone on that board who is qualified as a director, who's qualified and understands the detail of corporate governance and how important that is, and how important it is for boards to operate in a really professional and high standard way. And I think that is even more the case for charities, because it's such a mixture there of a lot of people who are there for really good reasons, but do they have the understanding of what it means to be a director? Because you're a director, and under the legal definition, you're a director. Do you have that? I think far more emphasis needs to be put onto onto that. And it's interesting, my experience at Cycle Park over the last few months is we've worked really hard to get a high caliber board, and we've now got a high caliber board. And we are able to, the benefit of that is the expertise that people bring into the analysis and the decision making, and the ability to shift quickly between being a team where we're working alongside the chief exec and the more senior managers, and they're working together, trying to understand, help, come up with solutions, ideas, make decisions, and then we can quickly shift into the challenge. So it's so we can move and take on different roles as a board, and I think that, but you've got to have the skills in there and the maturity to be able to do it. And I do think that one of the lessons from COVID for charity boards is you're going to have to, for a lot of charities, rethink your board composition, because the skills that you have on the board are,
that's a fascinating point.
Range. You just don't have the range and the caliber across the board that you need.
So do you feel then, Norman, that as a result of COVID, that we should be re-looking at the new skills that we might need that we don't have? Obviously, some might already have them, but there might be a cohort that don't, and therefore they should be fast-tracking additional or a change. Because it's one thing to bring on new board members, but if you want to keep the number at a manageable number, one of the difficult things is then you've got to ask people to depart.
Well, my test would be, and I've not experienced this at Cycle Park, but my test would be, look at the trustees on your board and who's put their hands up, put themselves forward to get stuck in at this time, and who are the ones whose contributions, whether that's by getting stuck in or by their challenge, by their experience, who are the ones that have been valuable versus the ones that perhaps it's been too much and too difficult. And I know, and this is not just in the charity sector. This is my experience in private organisations, SMEs, and so on as well. Is that a crisis tells you the calibre of the people that are there and the ones that are able to deal with it. But what it also does is it exposes a lack of expertise in some areas, and it should be, both of these should be obvious. So I would say that as things stable, and I know they're going to be stable for some time, but as they become less unstable over the coming months, then absolutely the right time to think about, we need to rethink our composition. Have we got the right range of people? Is the quality of the board at the level it needs to be at? And I think bringing in, whether you bring in people that are really experienced trustee directors, or even better chartered directors, qualified people that can come in and help you to do that, I think that would be a really valuable exercise.
I mean, interestingly, around with COVID, one of the sort of big things that was going on at Cycling UK was an investment in a digital strategy, and it's sort of like a buzzword now going around the sector. Everyone's got to get into digital, but I think it's really interesting when you say to people, well, what do you mean exactly by digital? And then it becomes a sort of blur sometimes that people are not quite. And again, it's about. And that, for example, would be an area where, if you wanted to skills test your board as well, in terms of, remember the board is there for advice, but if you've got really good advice, it can save you a fortune, and it can help, all the things we've spoken about, build your resilience, build your impact, and so on. So, we had a sum of money, quite a sizable sum of money that we were able to invest in that. But I think post-COVID, that now is not going to happen. So we've got to cut our cloth. And so again, one of the sort of things in terms of being resilient and open, transparent, is looking at the numbers and saying, well, we thought we could do the deluxe model. Now it might be somewhere between C and B. But that could still be a lot more money than other charities are able to do. And it might be that with that budget, the modelling of what that digital strategy might be might undertake different priorities for what you could have done. There's those, again, but having people around you who are experts in doing that are going to be really important. And I think that that's something where shining a light on it with what's happened now, we do, Cycling UK does have some good expertise on the board on some aspects of that, but I would imagine that they'd probably be wanting to bolster that further, looking ahead for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
I think that regrouping is really important, that when they have their nominations committee and start sitting down thinking what are the things we want, I think having that information from the executive as well to look at what can be delivered in the strategy and what can't can really help feed into that. But it should be done for me, it should be done together as a team. It shouldn't just be a group of volunteer trustees, skilled or not, sitting down deciding that. That's where the chief executive is the crucial linchpin with his or her directors, and that cohort, which might be a working group of 5 or 6, will then work together and do that. And that way you've got that buy-in, you've got the togetherness, you've got the trust, you've got all those really important ingredients that are necessary for a strong organisation.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, it was a good point there, and I think if I can add to that, what we talked about right at the start of the conversations around purpose. So what are the kind of test there is what are the ways of working, and what's the board composition, and what's the exec composition that is most likely to enable you to achieve your purpose as an organisation. But I think you can't really do that without having really good quality reflective time as a board of trustees.
Yeah. But you mentioned a point that's really very interesting though, and I was just thinking back about my experience of the skill sets that we spoke about here from an executive point of view. On a number of occasions, I've been in situations where you've done a plan, you've looked at what you want for the plan, and then I've looked at what I've got in my staffing team, and you look to see where the strengths and weaknesses are, and you think, I haven't got certain people to do that, or I need to shift someone onto that. So, when we did the current 5-year plan, it was really, really clear that we needed an income generation division because we were very dependent just on statutory funding and government funding a bit too much. So that was a change that was put in place, and we put a big emphasis on engagement and influencing because we can't change the world. You've got to. So we put a bit. So that was being done, but we didn't do that exercise with the board, and I think that's an interesting point. And that's something which actually chairs and CEOs need to sit down. It could be that, with 1 or 2 other board members, and that you actually have to work that through and say, well, we've got this plan now. These are the changes we're proposing to do on the executive. Do you think we need to look at what things do we think we need to do on the board? Just to help, again, focus what kind of individuals are we after. And when you've got those individuals, make absolutely sure you've got a program that supports them. And I know that's got to be done within reason, because the vast majority of the 162,000 registered charities in the UK are less than £1 million. In fact, they're less than £500,000.
Yeah.
So again, we've got very different perspectives, which is why the code of governance is different for under £1 million and over £1 million and so on. But you've got to also make it proportionate and appropriate to your size of organisation. But certainly, if you're running an organisation with 20, 30, 40 people or more than that, then all the things we're talking about would be appropriate.